Morning, folks. Bit wild here today. Not wild, but just goes doing a normal roll. Let's let you off, and then you'll. There you go. Yeah, that's fair off. So yeah, the weather's it's been raining here this morning. It's dry at the moment, but it's a bit chilly. There's Hade on one. Stop being silly. Come on, your jacket's all over the place now. Come on, here. Come on. Go sort your jacket out a minute. Look. Here. Don't be silly. Because you've got your jacket all over the place. Right. Okay. Wind your neck in just for 5 minutes. Right. So, really, I just wanted to pick up where we left off the other day. Where I left off the other day. So things at home were getting progressively worse and more violent, and I was beginning to struggle at school. First couple of years at secondary school, I'd try to get my head down and do my work, and when my dad was alive, I didn't get in trouble. I did not go to school. I went to school and did my best, and so she just likes to run. She's just mad. Come on, you'll lose your scarf in a minute. Come on. I struggled with maths big time, and my dad would do maths in his head. He didn't need to write down sums. And I remember, your scarf's fallen off now. Let's pick it up. I remember, he would sit down and try to explain, my maths homework, and I got really stuck on fractions. That was I just couldn't get my head around them. Makes you laugh, doesn't it? Because later on, when I got into drugs and stuff, you had to learn, you had to learn a lot about fractions and weights and quarters and ounces and, eighths and teats and all that. But I couldn't grasp it, and I just struggled. And so what they did at school, rather than try and help me, they put me in a higher set for maths. So of course I just went over the top of my head. I couldn't possibly grasp what was going on, and I just couldn't do it. It didn't matter how many times people explained to me. I just couldn't get a grasp of how to do it, and I guess I wasn't interested in it either. I mean, maths has always been an issue for me. I can cope with money and all that, but fractions was what got me. And my dad would try to, as I say, help me, and he could do it in his head, but he was rubbish at teaching. But as I say, things were getting worse. The violence was getting worse. And this one day, it was at lunchtime, and I think Mum was obviously working. She used to do a couple of cleaning jobs, and she worked at a local care home and helped out there cleaning and stuff. And my brother was home on leave from the army. It was before he was married, I believe. And he, I don't know what happened. I don't remember the circumstances, but it must have been an argument between my brother and my dad, or me and my dad, or I don't know. But I do remember this incident really clearly. And the next thing, I was standing in the front room, and my dad came up behind me and started trying to strangle me. And literally, he was trying to strangle me. He was standing behind me, and he had his arms round my neck from behind, and that was it. I thought I was a goner. And I guess I was shocked, because I'd always, like I said, when my dad used to hit me or, do what he was doing and be violent, there was always that bit that I felt, that he held back. And he didn't. But this time it was full on. He was going to kill me. There was no two ways about it. And fortunately, my brother burst through the kitchen door and obviously saw what was going on, and pulled my dad off me. And obviously, I can't remember what happened after that, but I think the incident so shocked me, because I kind of realised then how sick my father was. And as I say, he'd always sort of held back, and I never thought that he would go that kind of far. But it happened. And so, guys, where you been? Where you been? Should go home for breakfast then. Go home for breakfast. So, not long after that, it was a Monday, and I'd taken the day off school because I had a cold and I wasn't feeling particularly well. And my brother was back in the army. I think he was in Norway doing Arctic warfare training. As I say, he'd got his commando beret and green beret, and he was off living his life. And I was at home with a cold, and I remember I was upstairs in my bedroom actually talking to Mum, and I was reading a veterinary dictionary actually that somebody had given me. My aunt's husband had given me this wonderful veterinary dictionary, and I really treasured it. And I think we were discussing some of the horses, and I was off school, but I had to go up, and as I did, every day, several times a day, to go up and feed the horses, check on them, and make sure all was okay. And I thought, well, I'll go up, in a couple of hours and do what's got to be done and sort them out. And I don't think the weather was particularly brilliant. It was January, and I'm upstairs, as I say, chatting to Mum about something or other to do with the horses or this veterinary dictionary that I was reading. And there was a knock on the door. So of course my mum goes down to open the door, and the next thing I hear her screaming, absolutely floods of tears, screaming. And so of course I go down the stairs, and it was the headmaster from the local primary school, and the primary school backed onto backed onto one of the fields that we had horses in, little village primary school. And so my mum's screaming, "Your father's dead, your father's dead." And of course I didn't believe what was going on. It was, I didn't know what to think. Anyway, the teacher, apparently what had happened was they'd obviously noticed that my dad, who had gone up to the field to cut wood, he used to go up climb the trees and cut branches off the trees for firewood. We had an open fire, and so you would get all the logs and everything. And that particular morning, I remember Dad had taken me to the hospital, even though I had a day off school because I had a cold. He'd taken me to the hospital because I had to have this, what they call Faradism, because I had bunions, really bad bunions. And it was all to do, I guess, with ill-fitting shoes, and I think I'd possibly been born with one. My mum had been born with bunions, and I'd gone in when I was 11 and they were going to operate, and then they realised that obviously my feet hadn't stopped growing, so they decided they weren't going to operate. But I used to go and have this Faradism where they put your feet in water with electrodes, sort of electric plates, and it would kind of pull your big toe out, and it didn't work. It was, they were way too far gone for that to work. But my dad had taken me in the morning for this Faradism, and I remember, we'd come home, he'd gone up the farm to cut wood as he normally did before he went to the pub, and he used to take his empty bottles back to the pub and get refund on the bottles. And I'd noticed that he was really quiet. And even my mum had said, "Frank, you don't look well, you need to have something to eat." And my dad never ate during the day. He would, and he didn't look right, and he was quiet, and he didn't talk much, and So anyway, my mum's in absolute hysterics, and the teacher says to me, "Lucy, make your mother a cup of tea. Your father's dead." I think he just came out with it. I suppose you have to, don't you? Of course, I just laughed. I couldn't believe it. I thought, don't be silly. How can he be dead? Anyway, the teacher went off, and apparently they found my father, or they noticed my father lying face down in the field with the horses. And obviously he was dead, but they don't know whether he kind of had a heart attack before he went up the tree, or whether he was up the tree and then he had a heart attack and fell out the tree, or whether he fell out the tree and then had a heart attack when he hit the ground, but he was dead. And so of course police were called, and it was bizarre because they obviously had to determine what the cause of death was. And they put headlines in the paper, the local paper that week, which read, "Mystery Death of Airman in Field." It's just hilarious. He'd been out of the RAF for years. And reading that, you'd think he'd crashed, this bloke had crashed his plane in the field, and he hadn't at all. So I remember, obviously my mum's beside herself. I think she rang my eldest brother. "No, come on, you're not eating that grass." And he came over. I believe he I believe he went to identify, obviously they took my dad to the morgue and had to identify him, and my mum was too much of a mess to cope with that. And of course, I think the first thing my mum did was hit the sherry bottle even harder. And it was strange because I couldn't take it in. I couldn't believe that he wasn't there any longer. I couldn't take it in. So I decided to go up to the horses, obviously, as I was going to do anyway. And I remember I went up with my friend, and my eldest brother had gone up there as well, obviously, and the police had shut all fields off, and they were waiting for the undertaker to come and take him away, and my mum, obviously, couldn't cope, like I was saying. So I go up the farm with the horses with my friend just to, do my normal routine with the horses, ponies. And I can remember we walked up there, and I think there were policemen sort of by the field. They said, "Well, you can't come in." And I said, "But it's my dad." And anyway, they let us obviously sort the horses out, and then obviously after that I came home, but nothing had sunk in. It wasn't, I was still expecting him to come through the door, and like I say, for a good while afterwards, even though we knew he was dead, and he'd been cremated, we were still waiting for him to come through the door. The anxiety and the stress was still as bad as if he'd been alive for quite a while afterwards. And I'm just going to put Scotia's lead back on. And so that was kind of what happened. It was all very sudden, and I shed no emotion, shed no tears. In fact, I had a week off school. I remember I had the rest of that week off school. And then when I went back to school the next week, all my friends were coming up and hugging me and going, "Oh, we're so sorry." And I was laughing my head off. I was going, "Why are you sorry? He's dead. It's great." I'm just going to put my phone down on there, just literally while I put Scotia's lead on. So I didn't feel any emotion at the time at all. And it was about 3 weeks later that I actually broke down. I think kind of had another kind of breakdown. Right, come on then, let's go home. And it was a huge relief to me. I mean, I didn't miss him. I didn't grieve for him in the sense that, oh my God, my dad's dead. And of course, my mum just carried on drinking even more. And it was, I believe. I don't believe that God just takes people out like that, but I believe that he heard my mother's prayer, and he brought the situation to an end. And I truly believe that, because I think had it gone on, one of us would have ended up, seriously injured or dead. So we had the funeral. That was a laugh in itself, because hang on a minute, just trying to put these bags in the bin. I remember my brother, who obviously was in was in the army. He was out in Norway, I think, when they told him of his dad's death. And I remember he drove my dad's car, I think, to the funeral. It wasn't held in the town where we lived. He was cremated, and it was held in a town, about 15 miles up the road. And I remember my brother and I went in the car, and I remember my brother wore his uniform, and there were, my dad's brothers, I think, came to the funeral, but it was all really sort of surreal, because even though he was gone and the violence had stopped, my mum obviously was still drinking, and so her drinking obviously accelerated to the point where, she was just a mess. And of course she was riddled with guilt, false guilt, over my father, and she blamed herself. But anyway, it was determined that he'd died of a coronary thrombosis. And as I say, he'd had a couple of strokes before, which had left him... Hey, what are you doing? Which had left him partly paralysed. But that was it. And all he left, as I say, was obviously my mum was married to him, so she received his RAF pension. And so we weren't destitute financially in that respect, but it was a huge relief, obviously, as you can imagine. No more violence, no more being beaten about, and watching mum getting beaten about, and and as I say, it got to the point where, if any outsider had seen the way that Dad behaved, you would just think he was totally mental, And I think when he tried to strangle me, I think that was a real big wake-up call to me, of the fact that he'd really lost it, to the point that he was prepared to actually kill me. And if it hadn't been for my brother being there, I seriously think that he could have followed through, and I wouldn't have been here today. And I always thank my brother. I don't think he remembers it. We've talked about it fairly recently, but boy, am I thankful to him for doing that. So that was the end, really, of 13 years of hell. So on the next bit of the story is, it's where I start going off the rails, and mum's drinking becomes worse, and then I'm out of control and get thrown out of school and start playing truant, getting into trouble. So I'll pick that up on the next video, and try and get the dogs home. So thank you for listening, and as I say, I'll pick it up on the next one.